Well, it's another lovely day to watch your favorite show on News Central Television, Report Desk Africa. I mean, this is a show where we give you stories that are making headlines across the African continent. And also we try to look at the past experiences, the present happenings, and the future expectations. And of course, it's always lovely to have you join us. My name is Blessings Mosugu.
And of course, I'm Dapo, Adegboye. A beautiful time to be on the show today. Well, you would say that Dapo is not on the, analysis side. Yes, today I'm Blessing sidekick. So yeah, it's got to be a great one today. Super excited to be here. So many, of course, talking points today, and we're super excited to also have you being a part of the show. Now let's take a look at the forecast of last week and the update that, of course, we've been tracking on the show and of course on News Central Television. Now, we told you that Zimbabwe will hold its presidential and parliamentary elections on August 23rd, even as the country continues to battle a raging economic crisis.
And of course, we also told you that the president of the Central African Republic, Faustin Archin Touadera, said that his country will hold a constitutional referendum in July that will potentially allow him to seek re-election in 2025. Well, finally, we gave you an update on East African leaders agreeing to extend their troop deployment in eastern DR Congo. But that's it for the forecasts of last week. We have two major stories that we will be discussing this week. Dapo, you want to help us with that?
Of course, one of the stories we'll be talking about on the show today happens to be with, we'll start off in southern part of Africa, particularly Zimbabwe, where the weakening of the local currency has been more pronounced in recent weeks, with the Zimbabwean dollar depreciating against the US dollar. This, of course, has called for the re-dollarization of the economy by Zimbabweans. Later on the program, we will switch gears as we take you to West Africa, particularly Nigeria, where we will discuss the implication of Nigeria's fuel subsidy, especially on Nigerian workers. Of course, a lot of people are, actually, reacting to and trying to adjust to the new pump price when it comes to petrol in Nigeria. Yeah.
Well, those are the stories we'll be discussing today, so you do not want to miss any of it. Do stay tuned. We'll go on a short break and we'll be right back. Well, now to our first story, we go to Zimbabwe. As the country's dollar lost its value and the economy spiraled into chaos, the government sought a lifeline to stabilize the nation. Now, since 2019, the Emmerson Mnangagwa-led government has sought ways to de-dollarize the country and strengthen the local Zimbabwean dollar. But that has not come without its own challenges. Now, some Zimbabweans are asking for the US dollar to be considered once again in a legal tender. Well, to further help us understand this better, our correspondent News Central's Omolola Ololade has a package that will further give more details about this upcoming development. Do take a look.
Zimbabwean businesses are refusing to take local currency, which continues to lose value in a struggling economy. Instead, they are accepting US dollars in a bid to protect themselves from soaring inflation. Many products in Zimbabwe are imported and businesses need foreign currency to thrive, but the Zimbabwean currency known as bond note is not accepted outside the country. Even local business owners such as food vendors continue to shun the local currency.
I still prefer sales made with the US dollar so that I can restock and keep the balance. If I keep bond notes when I think of buying US dollars or I want to restock later, the rate would have changed. So I think the US dollar is better.
However, the country's Ministry of Finance recently announced measures to boost local currency, saying all government agencies will now substantially collect fees in the local currency. He added that all duties, with few exceptions, will also be paid with the bond note. Economists say the measure is a step in the right direction, but the government should have put in place measures to cushion the effect of the usage of bond note on both individuals and businesses.
Measures that have been announced by the Minister of Finance are expected to firstly reduce the accelerated depreciation of the currency, and secondly, reduce the accelerated dollarization of the economy.
For now, we must dollarize, full stop, because the Zim dollar has lost the value, so you can't force a dead currency on people. Even government is refusing the Zim dollar. Go to the passport, you can't get a passport in Zim dollar. So who am I to take the Zim dollar? He is saying that he's going to be encouraging the use of Zim dollar for payment of levies and duties, but he's not talking about the income taxes.
The Zimbabwean government is against the dollarization of the economy, as it says there are not enough US dollars to sustain the country's economy. Although experts say the local currency is depreciating, the government says the reintroduction of its own currency will have value and help both individuals and businesses grow. Omolola Ololade reporting for News Central.
You would say indeed it's trying economic times in Zimbabwe right now, and of course you can see from the package there the current economic realities in Zimbabwe. Well, joining us to discuss this particular development, of course, is a development economist, Prosper Chitambara. Of course, will be giving us, more insight into this. Now, first of all, Chitambara, let's talk about some of the factors that led to the hyperinflation and subsequent failure of the Zimbabwean dollar. What do you think are some of the causes?
Well, the major cause really is the unsustainable growth in money supply that we have actually seen, of course, not just over the past few months, but over a very long period of time. There's been a massive increase in liquidity, which has resulted in chronic high inflation. And that chronic high inflation has led to a loss of confidence in the local currency. So you can't use the local currency to store value, to preserve value. So we have seen as a result, there's been an increase, sustained increase and growth in the demand for the United States dollar, which has in a way also perpetuated the further loss of value of the Zimbabwe dollar relative to the United States dollar. So it's largely a monetary phenomenon, the unsustainable growth in money supply. So we have too much Zimbabwe dollars chasing too few goods, which has caused inflationary pressures. And we have too much Zimbabwe dollars chasing too few United States dollars, which has resulted in a depreciation of the Zimbabwe dollar. Of course, that has created uncertainties in the economy. And of course, it affects everyone. Every economic agent is affected, consumers, households, businesses, investors, even government itself is affected by the loss of value of the Zimbabwean dollar.
Prosper, I'll take you up on the fact that you mentioned uncertainties in the economy. Now, reports reaching us says that vendors and individuals, buyers alike, are refusing to trade in the local currency now. They're now trading in foreign currency. How does the adoption of dollarization, impact the Zimbabwean economy, both in the positive light and negatively?
So what it does is that it stabilizes the situation, because once you adopt the United States dollar or even the South African rand, print money or create money, whether it's virtual money or even physical money. So by so doing, you actually ensure or enforce macroeconomic stability. We actually saw it in 2009 when we officially dollarized. We were actually able to eliminate overnight hyperinflation. But of course, it also limits your capacity to be able to deploy the monetary policy. So in terms of policy freedoms, the government becomes limited, but it helps to ensure there is stability. But ultimately, without stability, the economy can't grow sustainably. Without stability, there can be no meaningful investments. It's difficult to plan if you're a business person, if you're an investor. So we really need stability as a basic underpinning to support growth and to support development.
All right, now I want to take you back, I mean, a bit. Now, some would say that the problem with the Zimbabwean dollar right now, isn't just, well, I say the fault of the current administration, that it dates back to even the former administration in terms of policy. Yeah. I mean, we know that the former administration was a bit isolationist. It was anti-West, and for that reason, there were a lot of sanctions and all of that. Is that enough justification for what Zimbabweans are going through at the moment?
Yeah, of course, there are legacy issues that have continued to affect the economy. But for a very long time, we've had challenges in terms of prudent macroeconomic management. I would even date the challenges to 1997. I believe that was the genesis when we had what is now called Black Friday. The Zimbabwe dollar actually depreciated by almost 70%, 80% in 1997, 14 November, when the government decided to compensate the former veterans of the Liberation Army, of the liberation struggle, for that's something that had not been budgeted for. So government had to borrow money domestically and even offshore, and government also had to print money to be able to finance that massive compensation, which was at the time valued at about 2 billion United States dollars, if you were to convert. Then, of course, the following year, we had the war in the Democratic Republic of Congo, whereby our government actually intervened in the war. And again, it's something that had not been budgeted for, so it affected the government's fiscal position. Then a few years later, we saw the onset of the agrarian land reform program, which was done in a very chaotic and violent manner, so that affected the backbone of commercial agriculture. So from 2000, Zimbabwe started becoming a net food importer instead of a net food exporter. So issues of food security, then starting, or food insecurity rather, once the land reform program kicks in, then that resulted in the hyperinflation that we actually experienced in 2008. I would say most of the policies that were now being implemented during that period were populist measures, economically irrational measures, characterized by creation of money again to finance expedient programs by the government. And of course, the sanctions again also came on board in the early 2000s, and that obviously exacerbated an already tenuous macroeconomic situation. So I would say I think it's largely mismanagement of the economy, unsustainable growth in money supply to finance government programs, and mismanagement of even parastatals. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of leakages, a lot of smuggling of minerals, and of course the sanctions. So it's a combination of a number of factors that have seen the country reach the level it is now.
Okay, Prosper, now can we say, and rightfully, hopefully so, that this is just a temporary measure, that's the dollarization now, to stabilize the economy? And are we hoping that there's a reintroduction of the Zimbabwean currency when things actually settle?
So what the current situation is that we are in a dual currency regime. So we have the Zim dollar that's circulating alongside the United States dollar. Of course, so the calls are for the government to ditch the Zim dollar in favor of the US dollar. Of course, the government said that they have no intentions of doing that, especially we are given the fact that we are heading into the election on the 23rd of August. So there are obviously a lot of pressures on public spending.
But then if the government does not intend to do that, is there any other plan underway that we don't know about to at least stabilize the economy and increase the value of the dollar, the Zimbabwe dollar, I mean?
No, there's no substantive plan in my view, because any substantive plan to stabilize the local currency must involve, number one, monetary tightening, fiscal tightening, and of course, institutional reforms. So what we've witnessed in terms of the reform agenda is the further tightening of the government's monetary policy regime. But the fiscal policy remains largely expansionary. So the fiscal policy and the monetary policy, in my view, are working at cross purposes. And of course, to sustain confidence, you also then have to implement institutional reforms like reforming your government parastatals that have actually been loss-making. And of course, that's also an area where government has been losing a lot of money. So that obviously compounds the situation. So any sustainable stabilization agenda must involve fiscal reforms, monetary reforms, as well as institutional reforms. And I'm not sure that that's going to be possible, especially before an election. So I think our hope is that if we're able to manage our elections well, the new government should be then able to address these issues in a more holistic, inclusive, and more comprehensive manner.
All right. Now, recently, there was a, well, I call it very, very smearing documentary of Zimbabwe, where, of course, in that documentary, talked about laundering and gold smuggling in Zimbabwe. I mean, some notable names were even roped into that particular documentary. One of them was is the pastor, Rupert Angel. And of course, in that documentary, there was reference to where the president said Zimbabwe is open to business, right? Meaning that, well, maybe, I mean, that statement wasn't placed in a context, right? Meaning that if you have any form of business to boost the economy, maybe the country is open to you. But we saw that the documentary at the end of the day exposed some shady deals as regards mineral smuggling, particularly gold. Do you think that that has further, contributed to what the Zimbabwean economy is going through, particularly when it comes to credibility and, of course, integrity in the international system?
Yes, definitely. Any negative news, definitely they affect the risk profile, the risk premium, rather. So that actually increases the country risk premium, which makes it even more difficult for Zimbabwe to be able to trade, to engage with the international community. So, and it puts a lot of unnecessary spotlight on the country, which again is not good for sustained growth and development, and also doesn't augur well for, in terms of our efforts to try to re-engage with the international community and also to unlock greater investment inflows and capital inflows into the economy. So that obviously is an adverse effect on the country's macroeconomic prospects and outlook.
All right, Prosper, now looking at the Zimbabwean dollar, the Zimbabwe currency, there seems to be a lot of numbers on one note. For example, you have like 50 million on a note. And I would like for us to know, is there a reason why it is that way? And could that in any way be linked to why the value is dropping?
I think I missed the earlier part of your question. Can you repeat?
So I was talking about the fact that on the Zimbabwe currency, you see a lot of numbers on one single note, like 50 million, equaling one note. And I'm just asking if there's a reason why that is, and if that contributes to why the value is dropping.
Why does one note have so many zeros?
I think that's a better way to put it.
Well. Well, I think the local currency has since been redenominated, so we no longer have those many zeros. So those many zeros were during the earlier hyperinflation episode, but the country has since redenominated the currency, so to speak. But I think at the current rate at which the inflation has actually been rising, we may actually reach that stage again where the government or the central bank reintroduces higher denomination notes. Because like currently, On the black market, the local currency is trading at between 5,000 and 7,000 Zimbabwe dollars to $1 and that situation has actually been ongoing. So now there are self-fulfilling expectations with economic agents believing that the local currency will continue to depreciate. So it's not sustainable for businesses. So it means even in the shops, businesses have to be changing price tags almost on a daily basis because the situation is so fluid and so dynamic.
All right. There's something that came up on the screen. One of the notes had $5 billion. That's Zimbabwean dollars. What can that get you in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, so that was during the first hyperinflation episode of 2008 when the central bank had to introduce those very high denomination notes. But at the current rate at which things are unraveling, there are concerns that we could probably reach those levels again, where the central bank may be forced to introduce those higher denomination notes, especially given there are also concerns that the government could even go the route of de-dollarization as a way of maybe trying to address the current instability, but that will probably even worsen the current situation. So it's a very delicate and a very sensitive position that we're in, and there is need for, I think, for a lot of dialogue and probably some kind of a social contract where all the partners and the stakeholders agree on a way forward in a more inclusive manner, because there are a lot of trade-offs, obviously,
right,
in terms of some of the options that have been put forward.
Okay, Prosper, sorry, because of our time, let's just take this back and run through this very quickly. Now, Zimbabwe operates a dual currency system currently, and the government is not going to budge when the citizens are asking that they ditch the Zimbabwe dollar and just stick to the foreign currency. But isn't that going to be a problem, looking at how citizens and vendors, like I mentioned earlier, are now refusing the local currency and just sticking to the foreign currency? Now, I don't know if you know what happened in Nigeria some time ago, where the new currency came, it wasn't enough, didn't go round, and then people were refusing the old currency, but the new currency was not in circulation. Isn't that going to be a problem of any sort?
No, it's going to be a problem, definitely, especially given the fact that the Zimbabwean economy is now largely informal. According to official statistics, about 90% of Zimbabweans are informally employed, and the informal economy actually contributes as much as 60% to the GDP, according to the International Monetary Fund statistics. So definitely it's going to create a lot of challenges because the market, the economy, to all intents and purposes, has now rejected the local currency. So there's been a massive loss of confidence in the local currency. So we can say the market is dollarized to all intents and purposes. So whether or not government is going to make that official or formal, I think that's something else. But the market is actually now rejected the local currency.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Prosper.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, you would agree that these are pretty interesting times in Zimbabwe. I know that there was a time when there was this picture I saw many years back. Someone wanted to purchase a loaf of bread, and he had stacks of notes, taken to the mall just to purchase a loaf of bread. I think he made reference to that when he said as far back as 2008. Yeah. But when it comes to, economic, well, I call it a crisis right now, it's not just peculiar, to Zimbabwe. A lot of countries post-COVID are still trying to come out of it. Africa, the continent, is not an exception. We know what we're facing in Nigeria. Ghana has its own fair share. So we just hope that the government there, is proactive enough to sort of, come up with some, what I call it, fast-paced economic policies that would boost the economy and, of course, keep it going.
Well, rightly said, and hopefully so. This is the Report Desk Africa, and we have just finished the first half where we talked about the Zimbabwe economy and whether or not they're going to ditch the local currency and stick to the foreign currency. We're going to keep you updated on that. But in the meantime, we're going on a short break, and when we come back, fuel subsidy in Nigeria. Stay with us.